They think we're shy, awkward, antisocial. But what if I told you? Introverts often see extroverts as loud, overwhelming, and sometimes even fake. Society constantly tells introverts to speak up, go out more, be confident, as if silence is a disease and stillness is a weakness. But no one ever asks, what do introverts actually think of the people on the other end of the spectrum? The ones always talking, always moving, always filling the room. To an introvert, being around an extrovert can feel like drowning in noise, where silence becomes a rare luxury. It's not about hatred. It's about exhaustion, discomfort, a sense that the world wasn't designed with quiet minds in mind. Today, we're not just scratching the surface. We're going deep into the thoughts introverts usually keep to themselves. The real stuff, the judgment, the envy, the admiration. And yes, even the quiet resentment. Welcome to this deep dive, not into psychology textbooks, but into the raw inner monologue of introverts who've had to adapt to an extrovert-dominated world. Whether you thrive in silence or you need a crowd to feel alive, this video will challenge how you see the other side. And somewhere near the end, we'll uncover a brutally honest truth introverts hold about extroverts, the kind of truth that's rarely said out loud. But we'll save that for the final chapter. So stay with us. Let's start with what every introvert feels, but rarely says. Being around extroverts is exhausting. For introverts, energy is limited, and social interaction drains it quickly. Extroverts, on the other hand, gain energy from talking, connecting, being in the spotlight. Most of society, unfortunately, is built around the extrovert experience. Open office plans, loud classrooms, group projects, icebreakers, networking events. Even fun has become exhausting. Loud parties, team-building exercises, club culture. To introverts, these are not social moments, they're survival. Drills. Imagine having to swim against the current every single day just to function. That's how introverts often feel, not because they're socially broken, but because the pace and noise of extroverted environments wear them down. It's not that they dislike people. It's just that too many people for too long becomes overwhelming. It's like being tuned into multiple radio stations at once. Eventually, you just crave silence. But energy isn't the only issue. Here's something introverts often notice, but almost never verbalize. To them, extroverts often seem like performers. There's a certain intensity to how extroverts present themselves, the way they speak, laugh, tell stories. It can feel exaggerated, like there's always a show happening. Every silence gets filled. Every story has a punchline. Every conversation is turned into entertainment. Now, that doesn't mean extroverts are fake. Not at all. Many are being exactly who they are. But to an introvert who values sincerity and depth over charisma, it can feel overwhelming, even disingenuous. While extroverts think they're creating connection, introverts may feel like they're just watching someone on stage. They'll smile, nod, even play along. But inside they're asking, is this who you really are? Or just the version you perform for others? Still, judgment isn't the full story. There's another, more difficult emotion introverts carry. Around extroverts, envy. Let's be honest, extroverts are socially rewarded. They're the ones who get noticed, remembered, promoted. They walk into a room and the energy shifts. People gravitate toward them. They're fun. They're engaging. They're likable. Introverts notice that. They feel it, not with bitterness, but with a kind of longing. A quiet voice inside often wonders, why can't I be like that? Why is it so hard to speak up? Why does small talk feel like acting? Why can't I walk into a room and light it up the way they do? It's not about wanting to be an extrovert. It's about wishing they didn't have to struggle so much just to be noticed in a world that glorifies loudness. While extroverts sparkle effortlessly, Introverts often feel invisible. And that invisibility, over time, can turn into frustration. There's also the constant misunderstanding. Extroverts often assume introverts are broken in some way, that they need to be fixed or brought out of their shell. But introverts don't see their quietness as a problem. In fact, silence is often where they feel most alive. Listening is how they connect. Thinking is how they process. But to extroverts, those things can look like disengagement or awkwardness. How many times have introverts heard, "You should talk more. Why are you so quiet? Come on, loosen up." These comments, while often well-intentioned, come off as judgmental, as if being introverted is a flaw to correct. What extroverts don't realize is that those very attempts to include and engage can make introverts feel even more alienated. And yet, despite the differences, despite the judgments and misunderstandings, introverts don't actually want a world without extroverts. The truth is, they need each other. Extroverts bring the spark. Introverts bring the stillness. Extroverts initiate. Introverts deepen. One creates motion. The other creates meaning. It's an unspoken balance, a tension that, when respected, creates harmony. But that doesn't mean everything is fine. There's still one more thing. One final truth that many introverts carry. A hidden belief about extroverts. It's something unspoken, uncomfortable, a bit dark. And once you hear it, you might never see extroverts the same way again. Let's pause for a moment. Because this entire conversation, introverts versus extroverts, it didn't start on social media or in pop psychology books. It started with Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who first gave these two personalities a name. But for Jung, introvert and extrovert weren't just personality types. They were deep, ancient energies of the psyche. According to Jung, an introvert isn't just someone who likes to be alone. They're someone whose attention flows inward. Their energy comes from within. They reflect before they act. They process before they speak. To them, solitude isn't lonely. It's sacred. Meanwhile, an extrovert directs energy outward, toward people, conversations, environments. They find meaning through experience, interaction, and external validation. But here's what Jung understood better than anyone. Neither side superior. He believed both traits exist within all of us, but one becomes dominant. And here's where it gets interesting. Jung warned that society tends to favor the extroverted personality, often at the expense of the introverted one. He wrote that modern man is extroverted almost to the point of madness, obsessed with appearances, noise, competition, and validation from others. Sound familiar? Jung believed that introverts were often misunderstood, not because they were broken, but because the world had lost touch with the value of the inner life. In his view, introverts are the ones who go inward, who descend into the unconscious, like mythological heroes entering a cave, and they return with insights, wisdom, and healing. That's the spiritual function of the introvert, not to entertain or impress, but to see more deeply. He also said something powerful. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. That's the essence of the introvert. They look inside. They awaken. But because that awakening happens in silence, in solitude, in slowness, the world often misses it. It's not flashy. It's not loud. It doesn't trend. But it's real and often transformational. And that's why Jung matters in this conversation. He didn't just give introverts a name. He gave them legitimacy. He gave them a mirror, a framework, a reason to honor their nature rather than fight it. Because the problem isn't that introverts are quiet. The problem is that we live in a world that mistakes noise for truth. When Carl Jung first introduced the terms introvert and extrovert in the early 20th century, he wasn't just categorizing people into personality types. He was describing something much deeper, a fundamental way our consciousness orients itself toward the world. In Jung's view, introversion and extroversion weren't labels to slap on people in quizzes or personality tests. They were archetypal, patterns of human energy, shaping how we interact with others, how we think, how we dream, and how we suffer. Let's break this down. According to Jung, introverts direct their energy inward. Their source of vitality comes from reflection, introspection, and solitude. They aren't necessarily antisocial. They are internally focused. For them, the outer world is interesting, yes, but it's also stimulating and often overwhelming. They prefer to process things deeply before responding, and they find their sense of purpose not from social validation, but from internal alignment, from listening to their inner voice. Extroverts, on the other hand, direct their energy outward, toward people, experiences, and the environment. They gain energy through interaction. Their sense of self often builds through engagement with the world, by speaking, doing, sharing, expressing. They aren't superficial. They're just outward-facing. They explore the world to understand themselves, while introverts explore themselves to understand the world. Jung emphasized that both tendencies exist within every person, but one usually dominates. In fact, he believed that true psychological balance comes not from clinging to one identity, but from integrating both. However, when one side is repressed, especially by cultural pressure, it creates a split in the psyche. And here's where it gets relevant. Jung observed something in his own time that is even more true today. Modern society rewards the extroverted personality almost exclusively. He said modern man had become extroverted to the point of madness. He was referring to a civilization obsessed with action, appearances, performance, competition, and external validation. He saw a world drifting away from the soul, from the quiet, reflective space where real transformation begins. In a sense, Jung was warning us. A society that forgets its introverts loses its depth. It loses its anchor. It loses the very space where wisdom, creativity, and healing come from. He also noticed how extroversion, when overemphasized, to become a kind of mask. People would learn to play roles that had nothing to do with their inner truth, smiling when they're hurting, performing when they're empty, pretending to connect when they feel completely alone. And the more someone lives outward, the less they're in touch with their own unconscious. That's where depression, anxiety, and burnout quietly build. But perhaps the most profound thing Jung said about introverts is this: who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. This isn't a condemnation of extroversion. It's an invitation. Jung was pointing out that while the outer world offers dreams, status, approval, ambition, the inner world offers awakening. And awakening often comes through quiet, solitude, and deep introspection, all the things introverts naturally seek. Now imagine being an introvert in a society that teaches you to dream louder, move faster, speak more, hustle harder. From childhood, many introverts are made to feel like something is wrong with them. They're told to come out of their shell, be more sociable, smile more, make more friends. But what Jung would say is this: you were never broken. You were just inwardly oriented in an outwardly obsessed world. And that conflict is not just psychological, it's existential. Many introverts grow up second-guessing their instincts. They learn to hide their depth, to mute their silence, to conform to extroverted norms just to survive school, relationships, jobs. Some even begin to perform, developing extroverted masks just to be accepted, all while slowly disconnecting from their own inner truth. Jung believed this kind of disconnection was dangerous, not just uncomfortable, but soul-threatening. Because when you abandon your authentic psychological orientation to please the crowd, you don't just lose yourself. you lose your path. Believe that introverts often carry an unconscious burden, the call to individuate. That means to become your truest self, no matter how different or misunderstood that self might be. And individuation isn't found in loud places. It's often found in solitude, in depth, in confronting your own shadow, the part of yourself you hide, even from yourself. That's why Jung didn't just study introverts. He respected them. To him, introverts weren't awkward or shy or socially underdeveloped. They were often the people doing the deepest work, studying the unconscious, writing in notebooks, creating art, contemplating human nature, facing existential questions. They weren't chasing applause. They were chasing truth. And the world needs that dot. But here's the paradox. Even though introverts often carry profound insight, their quiet nature means they are heard less often. And Jung believed this imbalance could only be healed when society began to value the inner life again, the dreamers, the thinkers, the silent creators. This is why so many of the world's greatest minds were introverts, not because introversion is better, but because it allowed them to go inward long enough to touch what others missed. Jung knew that solitude was a gateway, not to isolation, but to understanding. He once said, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing, which makes my life worth living." In solitude, he wrote, he wasn't alone, because he was with his soul. So, what does all this mean for us today, in the age of hyperconnectivity, algorithmic attention, and digital noise? It means introverts have to fight harder to stay true to themselves, to protect their time, their space, their silence. It means we need to stop seeing introversion as a flaw and start seeing it as a gift, especially in a world that's addicted to distraction. And it also means extroverts can benefit from slowing down, going inward, sitting in silence, and listening not just to others, but to themselves. If Jung were alive today, he might say, the conflict between introverts and extroverts isn't something to be solved. It's something to be understood, respected, and balanced. Each side holds a mirror for the other. And true wholeness comes when both energies are honored, within us and in the world around us. So whether you look outward to dream or inward to awaken, remember, you are not broken. You're just wired differently. And your orientation, whether quiet or loud, deep or dynamic, has a purpose. It's time the world remembered that. We'll get into that in the final chapter, the hidden resentment. So stick around. Now let's talk about what we teased earlier, the hidden resentment. The part that introverts almost never admit, not publicly, and sometimes not even to themselves. It's not that they hate extroverts, not that they're jealous all the time. It's deeper than that. It's the quiet, bitter feeling that no matter how much value introverts bring, it will never be loud enough to matter. You see, the world listens to volume before it listens to wisdom. People respond to confidence before they examine content. And in a society that rewards charisma over character, introverts often feel irrelevant. Their thoughts are deeper, their emotions more layered, their ideas often more nuanced, but because they aren't shouted from a stage or packaged in charm, they go unnoticed. That's the resentment. Not toward extroverts as people, but toward a culture that seems to always celebrate them, while quietly dismissing the value of introversion. The resentment grows from years of being overlooked in group discussions, ignored in meetings, or seen as boring at parties, even though the most thoughtful person in the room was simply the quiet one in the corner. Introverts don't resent extroverts for being loud. They resent that they have to compete with that loudness just to be heard. They resent that in order to gain attention, they're often told to fake it, be more outgoing, learn to sell yourself. As if silence, depth, and reflection aren't valid currencies in today's world. And even worse, many introverts have been praised, but only when they acted more extroverted. Wow, you were so talkative today. Look at you being social. It sounds like a compliment, but what it really says is, we only see your value when you become less like yourself. It hits deep. That's the quiet wound, the hidden tension, the unspoken frustration of living in a world that measures presence in volume instead of value. That's the resentment. But here's the turning point, and I say this as a reminder to both introverts and extroverts. We need each other, truly. Introverts give the world stillness, depth, and clarity, especially in a time where everything feels fast and shallow. Extroverts give the world connection, spontaneity, and energy, especially in a time where people crave belonging. These aren't opposing forces. They're complementary ones. Introverts teach us how to listen, really listen, how to think before reacting, how to be okay with our own thoughts. Extroverts teach us how to show up, how to take risks, how to bring people together. It's not about changing who you are. It's about respecting the other side, understanding that both internal and external worlds have power. And maybe, just maybe, the future belongs to those who can balance both. So whether you're the quiet thinker or the bold talker, or something in between, ask yourself this honestly: are you an introvert or an extrovert? And how do you see the other side? Let's have that conversation down in the comments, because maybe, just maybe, it's time we started listening to each other for real.